Get ready October 7th in Hackensack, New Jersey. Live to Lead, a unique John Maxwell Company leadership development experience designed to equip you with new perspectives, practical tools, and key takeaways. Their speakers include Dr. John Maxwell himself, Simon Sinek, Liz Wiseman, and Dan Cathy. Get your tickets today at l2l.johnmaxwell.com/finder and enter the word Hackensack. Hello everyone, and welcome to Savvy Business Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and gifts with the world. Our topic today is eliminating obstacles to creating sustainable wealth with authors Pegi Burdick and Cara MacMill. Find out more about Pegi Burdick's book, It's Never About Money, Even When It Is, at thefinancialwhisperer.com. Find out more about Cara MacMill's book, It's Only Money and It Grows on Trees, at caramacmillan.com. Hi, Pegi. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you this morning?
I am well. How are things in Brooklyn?
Oh, we're doing awesome. Actually, it's afternoon here and morning for you. Yes, it's
that's
wonderful.
True. Nice. Now, I was born in Brooklyn, so.
Oh, wow. Where?
Brooklyn Methodist Hospital.
Aw, I love Brooklyn. It has so much character.
Yeah.
It is the bomb. If you come to New York, people, you must visit Brooklyn. So much here. But I'm so happy to have you here. One of the biggest topics we get on Savvy here is about money and sales. It is like the number one talked about topic is money. And you've written a wonderful book called It's Never About Money, Even When It Is. And tell the audience a little bit about your background. What led you to writing your book?
I was probably to write it because I love to teach. I didn't know that until I was much older. I love to help. I'm very inclusive. My life fell apart in 2007. And in my journey back from my own personal financial cliff, I learned and created amazing theories, thoughts, tools, and then I was able to experiment with some people, willing to be my guinea pig, because I started putting together some things that to the surface would have no relationship to each other. And it was through that alchemy, so to speak, that I then came up with a program and then said to myself, well, heck, if this is good for me and it helps me, it probably could help another person, specifically a woman. So that's in part how the desire got developed to write something down so someone could follow it. Because people, I learned this when I was a mortgage broker, people wanted information, but they didn't have access to where it would be because it's such a loaded topic, money. And women and money gets bigger. Women, money, and shame, it's going off the charts. So the book was really written with the intention of teaching people the most basic of tools, vocabulary. If you can describe it accurately to 100% of what that feeling is, then you've just created some space between yourself and the stress or the shame or whatever that feeling is. You're starting to get control. And that's really what I talk about, is how to get control back in your life, because if your finances are out of whack, other parts of your life are out of whack as well. But how do you fix it?
I love this topic myself, Pegi. I myself had gone through great financial turmoil. Both when I started my business, I had to declare bankruptcy a little over 2 years later. And also with my personal life years back, where I just went haywire, spending money like crazy. To deal with emotional issues in my life, I just go shop, make myself feel beautiful by buying that beautiful dress or that beautiful hat, and so be it. It wasn't until my friend sat down with me and said, I think you have a problem. I said, what problem? She's like, I think you have a debt problem. I'm like, oh, I don't have much debt. I don't have more than $12,000 worth of debt. She's like, let's open your statement, shall we? And we did, and it was $26,000. And I almost fell over, was crying, and like, how did that happen without me realizing it? And it's really amazing that when you're able to get a handle, like, that's where the journey began for me. Like, why did I do that? What was going through my mind? Because it didn't happen all at once. What have you found working with women in particular that we get in our own way when it comes to money and get into these situations? How did that come about?
Well, money or having money most often is about power. And traditionally, men have had all the power. They've had all the money. So when women have, or men too, have different ways of expressing their stress, their angst, their worry, which everybody has, we end up then doing goofy things as opposed to being able to identify the feeling, being able to identify the origin of it, and then being able to identify tools to help you fix it. Everyone skips that step because they have the feeling and then they have the behavior. It's like a river with two banks. On one bank is the feeling, on the other bank is the behavior. There's a disconnect between the two. So unless someone is willing to take the time to fix that. So the issue really is because it's not about the money. You have someone who's very successful. How many women do I run across, or men run across, I don't have issues with money. Well, it's not about the money. What about the fact that you have to have 2 drinks every night when you come home? What about the fact that you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day? What's about the fact your kids don't talk to you? Your college, you know what I'm saying? So if you look at pieces of someone's life, it's like a big wagon wheel. And how they all intersect really comes down to the core of the wagon wheel. If the core is broken, then the wheel will wobble. The wheel represents your self-esteem, and everyone does wheels and whatever. Why? Because they have to do with balance. But if the center of that wheel is disconnected, then the only way you're going to feel integrated and whole and in control is to fix the hub of the wheel. You got to glue it back together. You can only do that by building your self-esteem. So when women, more than men, because we're much more vulnerable to this. You know, people get divorced. First of all, why are people having children if they have a mediocre relationship? People have children, kids. Well, it was a whole other topic, but anyway, women are more susceptible. We have more going for us, and we also pay a higher price. So,
yeah, it's such a deep topic. I mean, for me, I realized when I started to look more deeply into it that there was a greater sense of dissatisfaction with myself as a person, not feeling, because I had this idea of being perfect, which is an illusion. I mean, what's perfect today, what's perfect is not tomorrow what's perfect. And also the sense of I'm not enoughness. And when I started and when I started to get more deep into that, I was like, where is that coming from? And so I like when you mentioned the disconnect between behavior and feeling. How do you help people, because you've also worked with people in this realm as a personal development coach, how do you help your clients bridge the two from emotions to their behavior?
Great question. Here's how it starts. It always starts with identifying, this goes back to my book, identifying what the real feeling is. So let's take an example that someone is grouchy, someone's moody, someone's impatient. Where is that coming from? Right? So when you track it back, and this was my journey, I tracked back those feelings in those moments to feeling I had no respect for myself, no self-respect. I wasn't being treated with respect. I wasn't demanding to be treated with respect. And I always felt like I was sliding back down a hill. I couldn't grab onto the bush fast enough. I was always on the losing side of something. So when I get people to identify in the present where they are, because your life exists always in 3 time frames, the present, the past, and the future. The present is to identify that you feel off. The next thing is you take, and you can do this literally in fractions of a second, and then take a step back from it and being able to identify the source, and then being able to shift so that you can make a different choice in your behavior. So let's say that someone is, their normal way to respond, and that you hear this all the time, is to express anger. They're grouchy. Next thing you know is they're snapping at the dog, being very cold to their own child, being in a bad mood. How often do you grow up and hear that about your family? Oh, it's a bad mood. Like it's acceptable. It's not acceptable. But we learn that it's acceptable as opposed to being self-examining and taking responsibility for the feeling and giving yourself some options on how you want to be treated. Does that mean that you then go back into the boss's office, close the door, and say to him, I'm not happy with what you just said and how you're treating me? Right? How often does that happen? How often do parents and children have the kind of conversation where the child says, I feel like you don't really hear me, as opposed to having a tantrum to be able to talk it through.
Mm.
That's where the control is. So I teach people how to be able to, I created this and I stole it from Homeland Security, the 4 colors, blue, yellow, orange, and red. Blue, and this is, mothers have it tough because they've got to keep their ears open all the time for their kids. I'll tell you, a mother's in the kitchen, her 2-year-old is playing with the toy in the next room.
Mm-hmm.
And she hears him banging away with the hammer and all this noise, and the noise stops. And meanwhile, she's trying to make dinner, and maybe she's got another child in her arms, right? Mm-hmm. If she doesn't hear that noise that child's making, and then yell into the room to say to him, Bobby, where are you? How are you? What's going on? And no response, that blue has turned to yellow. Something is going, something shifted. That mother's got to walk, turn the gas off, go walk into the other room to see what he's up to. Mm-hmm. Why is he suddenly quiet? Well, she's got to figure it out right then and there with him. She's got to speak to him right then and there, as opposed to ignoring him. Your feelings are your identity. Mm. So when you shift from blue to yellow, it's pay attention time. When you shift from yellow to orange, you better start looking around for a helmet to put on, because the next color's red, and these kids, you hear them all the time. They're having a meltdown, and the parents don't do anything.
Yeah,
that is so bad for a child.
Yeah, what does it say to them, right, as far as not being listened to? Yes, exactly.
You're not being heard. I grew up being invisible as the youngest in my family. It's a big problem with kids that are the youngest, is they feel that they just don't exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do we hear? I mean, I knew number one thing I heard from my parents, my grandparents and such was kids are to be seen, not heard. And getcha, I was, I think, 20 years old at the last time I heard that. I was sitting at a table with all my aunts and uncles, and they were all adults. And I saw myself as an adult at that point. And they were talking about a subject, and I decided to voice my opinion. And my mom said, or my grandma said actually, kids are to be seen, not heard. I immediately felt,
wow.
Yeah, I immediately not only felt shut down, I felt, as you were saying, disrespected, and felt like I was like an inch tall. And so I found it interesting when you were mentioning impatience. That's one of the things I go to often when I'm in a negative space is impatience.
Yeah.
So I thought that's very interesting that you tied impatience with not feeling respected. Very interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Well, but now that you have that language, you can expand upon it. If you're supposed to live every day with joy and feeling in control and feeling calm, and you have anything other than that, then you have some homework to do. You have a choice. You can be grouchy, you can be, quote, off, or you can be smiling and be grateful that you have this life, that you have excellence. You know what I'm saying? So people have those choices every single day, all day long. They just choose not to do it. No one wants to take responsibility for how they feel. No one wants to take responsibility for making a mistake and saying, yep, that's me, I did it, and I did it because I'm lazy, or I did it because I'm in a hurry, or and they explain to themselves, or maybe explain to them why they did it. That's it. Story over. No,
move on.
There's no need to drag it on, right? There's no need to then get into, the passive aggressiveness with my partner, blah, blah, blah. If they don't talk about that stuff, they shouldn't be having children. I'm real clear about that. You've got to be intact yourself before you're going to model and take care of someone. Yeah. Because you have to be available.
Yes.
So, let's go back to the same topic of kids.
Yeah. I had heard many women say, hey, I've seen even, but women who've come on my show in the past, and they come on, they talk loads of, my business is doing awesome, I feel awesome, I'm doing successful, blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, by the time we get off the interview, I'm like, wow, your business is kicking. But behind closed doors, sometimes they tell me a different story, that they're really not all that happy. They're really miserable. And I find that intriguing. How could you be so successful outwardly and be so not happy inside?
Yeah, that happens a lot. Women, especially, the pressure on women is staggering, and you get to see it really, really in the forefront during this political election. Women are under scrutiny by the media and treated differently in the media than men are, and it's been going on forever. But what happens to so many women who have, again, goes back to we have so much, so much of it is expected of us, and people are jealous of us, I truly think. But when you have all this pressure to be successful as a woman and you struggle with other parts of your lives, your intimacy levels with your children, your capacity to really, really trust your partner, everything becomes then up for fodder. So the key for so many of these women is to forgive themselves and have tools that they can move ahead so they don't feel like they're constantly, as you said earlier, not enough. It's a big issue for women. Everything we do is always shrouded in, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Well, what is enough?
Yeah.
Can somebody please explain to me what enough looks like and feels like?
And really, it's not about not enough money, because even in my own life, it was often about, it's not enough me. I'm not giving enough. I'm not being enough. And
you're not receiving. You're also not receiving enough.
Right? Good point. Good point, Peggy. Good point.
Right.
Yeah, in my early part of my 20s and 30s, I refused to take gifts. No, I'm not taking gifts. It's not right. I only like to give. It's not good to take. And I got talk about eye-opening, Peggy. Eye-opening. I was like 26 years old, went to my dance teacher's house, and he offered everyone soda. I was taught never to be as much as a person that is a giver and not a taker. So when he asked, would you like some soda? I said, no, it's okay, it's okay. Everyone in the room said, oh, I'll have some soda. They're all drinking soda and whatever wine, and I'm like sitting there like, I want some soda, man. So then after about 15 minutes, I said, could I have some soda? And he's like, why didn't you just say so when I asked you first? But how many of us do that?
A lot. I didn't learn because somehow deeply back there, we learned in part it was about power. So by not wanting to feel obligated by saying yes, the other side of it is that people want you to receive. People want you to take the cup of coffee they've offered to you when you come into their house. So it makes them feel good. But the business of not being able to receive it comes from fear. So there you are, the message you got up, don't be seen but not heard. I mean, put a piece of tape over your mouth. Don't let us give you anything. Don't receive anything. We reach out to you. It's upside down and backwards.
Yeah. And then you can see why it works out into all areas of your life, including money and the feeling of continual not enoughness in all areas, not just money. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I love the title of your book. It's never about money. Why is it never really about money?
Because money is a metaphor. Money is what I call collateral damage. It's not the source of the problem. It's just the visibility of the problem. The source of the problem is emotionally someone's disconnected. So again, it comes out in what I call second-tier displays. It could be weight. It could be drinking too much. It could be being disconnected from your family. It shows up in a whole different range of areas. And people get to pick. I picked money because I was the youngest. My brother and I are 22 months apart, but everything I wanted to do, because younger kids follow older kids around, everything I wanted to do, he was doing, and my mother kept discouraging me. Don't compete with your brother. Don't compete with your brother. It's like, what kind of message is that do you give to the other child? Why can't I compete? Why can't I do the same thing, and why is it a competition? Right? So for me, money became a display of worthiness. Well, and of course it's passive aggressive. I'm going to show you. That's what it's like. I'm going to eat one more cupcake, and meanwhile I can't eat any more. But I'm going to push those feelings of pain and shame away from my stomach. I'm going to eat yet even more. Who are you really punishing? Right? Because again, if we weren't valued for our feelings, then what luck do I have with myself to be valued? Right? No chance, because clearly you've told me that I'm not enough. I'm not tall enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not what to receive whatever you have, and of course they have nothing to give. That's the great irony. That's the big joke. When you finally get to my age, or you do all this processing, you realize there was nothing, the bargaining wasn't even a bargain. I felt I had power, and I didn't. But I power to ruin my life, that certainly I could do.
But, but this is interesting talk in that once you start to, and you mentioned this earlier in the conversation, take responsibility, start to reflect on what's going on in your life. Why am I not happy? Let's go deeper on where are those feelings coming from, getting to the root feeling or emotion. But then how do we start to gain control of the situation and really start to make a difference and change our lives for the better, both financially and otherwise?
Well, it's always a choice. That's it. If you choose to gain self-awareness, painful as the journey will be at times, then you can do it. But a lot of people want the result, but they don't want to do the work. They buy the books, and the books end up supporting the leg of a coffee table. Right? Yeah. It's very, very, it's almost impossible for someone to do it by themselves. They have to do it with someone else to keep them accountable. That's why Weight Watchers was so successful. It was the first time there was a program out there that made people, it was interactive, it made you accountable, you had to get weighed every week, and you had a forum in which you discuss your pain or the stuff that was going on in your life that was causing stress. So Jean Neidish put together 3 different pieces of that, and that's why it became so successful. So, and there are tons of studies that engagement and doing things as a group and keeping people accountable to each other for whatever reason is the way to have success in a community.
Why is it that often people will have an idea to go a certain direction, whether it's losing weight and I'm going to join the gym or whatever their resolution sometime during the first of the year? Why is it often that people don't stay on track? Is it that as humans we really need other people to stay on track?
No, here's the thing. Okay. When we feel diminished and we have a disconnect, what happens, it has been happening our entire life, goes back to self-sabotage. I commit myself to make a New Year's resolution. I commit myself to putting $50 in my savings account a week. Now, if anyone that goes to my site, there are, you know what, our brand new site just came up. I don't think it's there. But anyway, you can imagine a map, and it's a real map. And there are 4 stops on the map. The first stop on the left is going to be keeping yourself commitments. The next train stop is going to be self-respect. The third stop is going to be trust. And the last stop is going to be self-love. That is, I call, the holy grail. That is the map out of the mess you're in. So I've committed myself to $50 a month. And here comes Friday, and I haven't done it. It's Friday noon. And I say to myself, gosh, you know what, I have a half hour before I can get to the bank, and what am I going to do? It's like, okay, we'll revisit this. Well, as soon as you start to negotiate with the self-commitment, guess what? You've lost. Because if you don't get to the bank by 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, guess what? Your self-sabotage has come up to play and now is holding you back from keeping your self-commitments. So when you have accountability with someone else, which is I do with my clients, I say, so what was the feeling you were experiencing when you realized you had to get to the bank and you weren't sure you were going to make it? It's like a Polaroid. Describe to me in infinite terms what was going on with you emotionally. And when they explain it to me, then we dismantle the whole thing, and then we see where that self-sabotage is coming from and how to fix it so it doesn't happen next week. And let's say it happens week after week after week, and you got like 6 weeks of never making it to the bank, right? Then we just have to shift. You've got to go back even more on a sophisticated level, almost like a cellular level, to really determine that piece. Because I hear this all the time. I did this, and I did that, and I committed to here, and I bought this book. I did everything, and 6 months go by, and I'm still in the same mess. I've been trying to stay in a budget. It doesn't work. Yeah, P.S., budgets don't work. Budgets are external. Internally is the way we need to fix ourselves, and then the external stuff flows very gracefully and naturally. That's why when we fix the self-esteem, we fix your self-respect, it dominoes naturally into how you do everything in your life, whether it's eating, whether it's your personal habits, how if your closet is a mess, and what your debt and your money situation is about. Then you're saving the money and staying on track because it feels good. What I said to you a little while ago, that you should be living in that blue sphere all the time. As soon as you step out of feeling good and shift to yellow, you got a problem. You've got to catch it. It's not someone's responsibility to catch you. You've got to catch yourself. You have to be self-monitoring.
It's interesting.
So that meth. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting. Many, many years ago, I remember watching an Oprah episode where it was mentioned about deciding to do new commitments and how we often fall off the wagon. And I think it was mentioned by a guest or something. Why would you make a promise to someone else and keep it most of the time? You know, most of us will make a promise to our bosses, our husband, or whatever, but we won't keep a promise for ourselves often. We'll drop the ball on that. And the guest said something about it's really self-love, that it's really, that's what's missing, that if you loved yourself enough, you would never break a promise to yourself.
It's true.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. So if you take that piece of information and then look at your life or someone else's life, self-love is about self-esteem. Right? So if you can repair your self-esteem, you will not be self-sabotaging yourself. You'll be enjoying yourself as opposed to being punitive all the time. And then those voices come up in your head that you're not good enough. And the feeling of being disappointing to somebody, shame, all that stuff starts to play havoc with you.
So really, if you do have a low self-esteem, is it really first starting to maybe write down different feelings, or why is it I'm feeling not confident or having a good self-assurance of myself in different areas and writing that down? I mean, how do you go about it with your clients?
Well, journaling is very valuable. It's your time to be with yourself in a unguarded moment. Number two, I'm big on tapping. Being able to tap into those pressure points on our body is really, really important because you live in this moment, this threshold. Right? Remember I said earlier, it's the present, past, and future. This is your moment of decision right now. Right? But everything that you do, am I walking forward? Am I going to the right? What am I doing here? Am I having an apple? Am I on a diet? Or am I going to have a candy bar? What am I going to do? So getting people to identify how they feel is critical. The problem is a lot of people lack the language. You just said earlier, we never connect self-respect with, I guess my mind went blank. Self-respect, what did you say, with self-respect with money?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, no, being grouchy, being in a bad mood.
No,
impatience.
Yeah. For me,
it was what?
Impatience.
Impatience. That was the key. Right. Impatience. Right. So being able to have that sophistication is the only way someone can make a real change. And the change is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps. It's always a dance that we're doing because it's organic. It's live. And we all make mistakes. And we continue to make mistakes. It's called being real. It's the point of humanity. But not taking responsibility for that stuff is rampant in our country, in the world. People don't want to be responsible for the poor choices they've made. They want to blame everybody else for it.
Yeah, it's the government's fault, it's this fault. Yeah. Yeah, but for me, and I think what made a big change in my life is starting to realize, was I living the life that was most authentic, where I'm truly living my gifts and talents in the world? When I started to really examine that, I realized I wasn't, and that made a big impact on all parts of my life. How important do you think it is for people to discover their authentic life for them, and did that really play a part in some of the symptoms that might come about for either financial issues or otherwise?
Perfect question. That's exactly the problem. There is a split that happens really early on in your life, maybe actually when you come out of the womb. The split is who you are authentically and who you've adapted to become in order to survive your childhood. Surviving childhood is with every single species, because obviously a 1-year-old can't make cereal. So what happens is how that child is dealt with, and the moment he or she comes out of the womb, sets them on a certain course. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you end up adapting, which means you're disguising who you are authentically, it catches up with you at some point because you're unhappy. Yeah. Right? You've got a lot of debt, or you married the wrong guy, and your kids are out of control, and even the dog doesn't listen to you. All of that stuff goes on in your life. But until you are able and go on the journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance, your authentic side, as you experience with yourself, remains dormant. How else did I have 22 jobs and 6 businesses since the time I was 16? I was like a vagabond. I could never be content, even though it was about making money. It wasn't about making money. I had some successful businesses, and I had some bombs, right? Because I couldn't find my voice until my life totally fell apart in 2007. They cracked the egg, the veneer, and I did not have a choice. I had to move ahead and take a different path, because then it gave me permission to identify who I was authentically. Well, as soon as I did that, it was like 90-degree turn. I went in a totally different direction, and here I am, 9 years later, and I am happy. Yay. And I do what gives my life purpose, and if I am doing things that are purposeful, then I feel gratified, and I feel I've been successful, and it's not about money, but I'm doing my job in this life. I'm doing what I was born to do, and you have the same experience.
Yes, absolutely.
So the voice of authenticity is the key.
Wow.
If you can live that, if you can touch that, you're home free. Then not to say you don't have moments of having a meltdown, but you're living true to yourself. And that is your responsibility in this lifetime, is live your life, not someone else's life.
Yeah. And the one thing I realized for me, it wasn't a one night over one step process. It was a several year process. And towards the end of that process, when I was connected to a mentor who really helped me get in touch with my greater passion and talents, aka interviewing and connecting with people, she said, what does it mean for you not to live your greatest talents and gifts in the world? What are you missing out by not living it? And it's amazing sometimes when you just ask different questions, what a difference it can make, and really helping you break through, as you said before, the veneer.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the way to figure out something is do the opposite.
Really?
Well, that's what she did. She asked you the opposite.
Oh, you're right.
It's not what would it feel to do it right. She would say, what would you miss if you didn't do it?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, but she did. I was like, well, gee, I never thought of it. What would my life look like if I didn't go this direction? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating, Peggy. I love chatting with you today about this very important topic, and I'm hoping that it really implore people to go deeper for themselves and maybe give you a call and check out your wonderful book. It's never about money, even when it is, and tell them where they can find out more about you.
My website, which just came up, went live, I think yesterday, is www.thefinancialwhisperer.com. They can find the book there. There's a chapter that we've put there on depression. They can purchase the book through Amazon or through the website through Amazon. They can sign up for my newsletter, sign up for my blogs. So they can start to connect with me that way. And I always give people 30 minutes of my time for free. Yeah, and I thank you so much. This has been so lovely for me as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I love your website, The Financial Whisperer. It's awesome. Financial Whisperer.
Okay, exactly.
Well, again, Peggy, I want to thank you for coming to Savvy Business Radio and sharing your gifts and talents today.
Thank you very, very much.
Hi, Cara. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
Very well, Christina. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
You betcha. When Kelsey called me, your PR person, she sent a number of wonderful guests to me. But when I heard the name of your book, It's Only Money and It Grows on Trees, I knew we had to have you on. It's money and sales are the two #1 topics on our show. And you had a very unique perspective at how you looked at different views and perspectives on money. Before we go going deeper in the topics covered in your book, tell the audience a little bit about your background, what led you to writing your book.
Well, I'm an adjunct professor here in Ottawa, Canada at Algonquin College, and I just love my students. I mean, they're awesome, and they are empowering and ennobling, and it's so wonderful to be around them each and every time I have the privilege of being in the classroom. And we started talking, and I realized, I mean, they inspire me. And one day I was volunteering with my beloved down at our soup kitchen, which is the mission, and a number of some kids kind of came in at the end and sort of tried to avoid eye contact, and I realized that they were in my class. Mm. And it hit me about the struggles that people have, are, and yet they overcome. You know, these are students who had made it a personal commitment to, you know, return to school, to graduate, to develop themselves, to move forward. And financially, they may not have been as well prepared as they could have been. And so the book is written for my students, to try to get them to understand their subconscious and conscious money patterns so that they can enjoy and eat while they're in going through school.
Yeah, and so important. Why do you think, Cara, that so many people struggle with the concept of money? Because really, I mean, when you look at the way money is mostly used, and you mentioned this a lot in your book, that money is basically a tool, but it's become so complicated, more than any other tool we use in our lives. Why is that?
I believe that, you know, a lot of times people have equated, because money is basically the tool that funds our lifestyles. And so if we can keep it in that perspective, we have a very good chance at being confident and comfortable and leave it as a resource. But what has happened because of social media, because of entertainment industry, because we have equated a lot of our needs and the hierarchy of needs to money. So if you had money, you'd feel loved. If you had money, you would be able to have better shelter. If you had money, you would be able to fit in, belonging. And you know, through a lot of our cultural presentation, we have given it more power than it deserves. And so we need to take back that personal power and say, you know, what do we believe about money?
Yeah, and it's quite intriguing. I mean, many years ago, I had taken a self-help course, and it was centered around sales and money. And I thought, hey, it's just money, whatever. I know money like everyone else, and I just need to know how to sell. That's what I'm here for. But one of the exercises was you sit with a partner, and they will ask you and write down your answers. What does money mean to you? And they'll not ask you once. You don't think about it. You just say the first thing that comes to mind. And they did the same question for 2 minutes. So what does money mean to you? First question. What's money mean to you? First question. You know, first answer that comes to your mind. And you keep answering it over and over and over again. And after, like, I'd say maybe 10 times, you're like, I've got it. What else can I say about money? I said everything that comes to mind. And the teacher running the course said, well, interestingly, the first things that pop out of your head are what really you've been socially conditioned to think about money. You know, it's power, it's respect, it's this or that. But when you go deeper and you keep answering the question, it gets more and more uncomfortable, because now you're starting to hit your subconscious. Now you're starting to get beneath the surface to what you truly believe money means for you. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for folks. What? Yeah, I felt something from you.
Exactly. What I was going to say is, I think we need to ensure that when we're authentic with ourselves about how we feel about money, it's much easier to be able to ask for money, ask for sales. It's also easier to understand, you know, no, I'm not going to buy this, literally, because this is not something that is going to support my goals. I mean, one of the things that the story is written kind of in stories, and people are telling their learnings, their experiences. And what I find is a lot of times people can get into a wrong purchase decision that takes away their self-confidence, and that loss of self-confidence, that can translate into a loss of self-confidence in the workplace. And you know, for so many people, especially entrepreneurs, we really need to make sure that we understand this relationship so that we don't erode our self-confidence, and then in so doing, erode our own personal business goals as well.
Yeah, and all fronts. Yeah. And one of the interesting things about the exercise I did is that it came up not lovable is one of my answers. And I looked at it going, what? What does that have to do with money? But at the time, I was kind of a shopaholic, and I talked about this prior in past shows, that I was shopping like a drunken sailor for years and got into quite a bit of debt. And when you look at what I came up with when we did that exercise more than once is the I'm not lovable would explain why someone would go out and spend a load of money on clothes. And one of your characters did the same thing in your book, was kind of into shopping.
Zoe was definitely into shopping, yes.
Zoe, yes, yes. And it goes to show, you look at someone who goes out there and buys a bunch of clothes, well, they're self-absorbed, they're into making themselves look pretty. But often there's a story behind it, like there is with each of your characters, that's not so clear-cut. There's reasons and deep beliefs underneath that cause people to spend money the way they do.
And yes, and in Zoe's case, I mean, as she started to understand why she spent, why she was I'm kind of cautious about some of the terminology, the shopaholic and stuff. She was more, she had a perfectionist streak, which is a wonderful strength and quality in a lot of people. However, she needed to, for her, she had to balance that perfectionism with relationship. Mm-hmm. And I find that, so many of us need to. I like Zoe as a character. I mean, I'm probably not someone asked me in an interview, what message would I give my younger self? And I would say to my younger self, be a little more Zoe.
Oh.
Okay. I think there's, none of these sides are wrong. Mm-hmm. They're all just, we need to make sure that all elements are in balance, and that we need to, if you want to buy something that's beautiful, go ahead, but perhaps you can look to make sure that you're getting the best price for what it is. Mm-hmm. Don't sacrifice, and then you have to understand that it is a choice, so that you may have to cut in other areas, or you may have to modify in other areas of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was really cool about when Zoe started to wake up and go like, hey, wait a second, I went to the prom and I spent, I think near $1,000 it was. And she said, now, and then she broke down. She put and this is about becoming self-reflective. I've done this myself. You start putting a schedule down. Okay, I did X, Y, Z. How much did I spend on each item in that event? And she started to look at all the pieces she spent money on. And she said, how about if I had done it differently? And then one of your other classmates came to the table and said, this is how I did my prom, and I spent X, Y, Z. And Zoe became to realize that, hey, I could have had just as much fun and enjoyed myself without having to have spent as much money as I did.
It's choices. And I mean, we're even finding that now in the business world. So there's a lot of pressure to marketing, investment, and time management. And the same thing, if time is money, we have to manage both much more effectively. We do have to make trade-offs. So, for example, I mean, do you buy, if you're not a photographer and you want a better website, do you buy photographs? Mm-hmm. Or do you go try to take some yourself, or do you hire somebody or do you partner with a student at the local college who wants to be a photographer, and so you're promoting them? You get the same quality of photos, you're investing in your local community, and at the same time, you're not necessarily spending money. So there's different ways and resources that we have at our disposal to have the same end result. And yet we kind of assume that if you don't spend money on it, you're not going to get something of quality. And I think that's the mindset that we need to kind of just question and look at it, so that we can start having much better bottom lines for our businesses and for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Completely see what you're talking about when it comes to finding smarter ways to use our money.
I was going to talk about another character. She is based on someone who, and based loosely because I had to make up quite a bit. But I remember she was a woman I met at one point, and she had talked about how enjoyable the Depression was. And I remember thinking, she was a great grandmother of a friend, and I sort of looked at her because I had never heard people say that they had fun in the Depression.
Yeah.
Except for this one individual. And she talked about how, the men were riding the rails, so the women had created community. She loved to garden and feed people, so she she gardened in for a number of her neighbors and herself, growing enough food for everybody, while other people sewed, other people, did what they could. So they created this bartering system that allowed people whose natural resource or the tool that they used previously before the Depression was money. And I thought that's a really interesting model for entrepreneurs, because we have resources that we can pool together and strengths that we can say, all right, if you can do this, I'll do this. And in so doing, do self-promotion. Your ads may not, an ad may not be an appropriate one, but if 4 companies went in together to do an ad, it's not so unaffordable. Yeah. And so we need to work in a period of it, for entrepreneurs, we need to be more innovative. We need to be much more supportive and work together, because we do have less of a resource that's at our disposal, and you can't afford to make a bad choice.
Yeah. And I believe that was Mary, wasn't it? That character.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, and I love that, because it's funny, when I heard her mention the Depression, my grandma and my uncle, my grandma's brother, would talk about the Depression in the most horrible way. It was a really hard time. They had to ration their food. They had nothing good to say about it. But hearing Mary talk about it, I thought, well, wow, what did you know? It's just looking at the same situation with a different perspective and saying, how can I empower myself when things are really tough, and bring the community to get together, and we all are empowered. And I like that you mentioned for entrepreneurs that we don't have to be struggling against each other and working against each other, because this is what I see. And tell me if you see it, Cara. You go into a place of entrepreneurs and everyone is trying to get everyone else to buy their product, services, or information and cram it down everyone's throat, instead of realizing, how could we come together and share each other's gifts and talents, instead of trying to force it down someone's throat?
I have seen more of an evolution towards people working together to help others. Here, we have a group of female entrepreneurs. I think it's soon coming to LA. We call them SHEO, SHEO. And we're entrepreneurs who are activators. We do, we help sponsor other entrepreneurs get started. We do it's a small investment, and then we all pool the resources and we coach each other and work together and mentor up and coming entrepreneurs. I find that, sometimes we need to, and that's why the focus on giving back, the focus on tithing has gotten a bad rap. A lot of people say, but it is investing in customers. It's investing in, so that you can sustain that economic community when in ways that people need it. And we need to follow those models of giving back in our companies, because we're building goodwill. We're doing business development. One of the things that we do as a group of entrepreneurs here in Ottawa, Canada, Catherine Laundrie is a phenomenal, has her own business. It's called Cherry Pie, and she does event planning, she does promotion, public relations. Well, now what she does a lot of is still bring us all together, but we come together and we focus on raising money for First Nations communities, sending up sports equipment, writing cards. And so as you're working with another entrepreneur, recognizing how much we do have, instead of focusing on our lack, but focusing on our abundance, we have enough to share. It changes everyone's feeling in the room. Yeah. And you leave feeling confident. You leave feeling strong. You're ready to move on to whatever's next. And I find that those types of events for entrepreneurs are so powerful, because you don't focus on what you don't have. You focus on what you do have, and you bring that back to the office, to the next client, and you're more prepared to go that little extra mile that probably will win you the business, because you're confident, you're secure.
Oh, secure, keyword there. Because what I notice is it's just a matter of change of perspective, I believe, from what I'm gathering.
It is a change of perspective. And the other side of the book that we talk about is climate change. And it is impacting people. And, we have had the hottest year on record to date.
Wow.
Alberta is so beautiful. It's one of our most beautiful provinces. Fort McMurray, almost 100,000 people had to be evacuated because of forest fires, and 1,500 buildings and more are gone. And they've been evacuated now they've just started to come back to the city to find out what shape it's in. And 100,000 people evacuated. And someone said to me, well, why is this related to climate change? Well, as the world gets hotter, water is evaporating from the trees and the dead trees. So they're better timber. I mean, you'd love it for a forest, you'd love it for a campfire, but not necessarily for a forest fire. Mm-hmm. But that's what's happening is the wood becomes drier faster. And it is warm. It's very warm. And what was forest fire season started in June 1st in the 70s. It's now beginning in March 1st, which really is still winter.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we are going to need these skill sets going forward to create, basically to sustain ourselves, because you guys have had some pretty bad storms. Europe is flooding right now. Mm-hmm. We're going to face some challenges. I don't want this to be negative. I'm saying this is an opportunity. Yes. One, there's a green economy that's going to boom as we start to capture the carbon and cool our earth. Mm-hmm. Two, we're going to start working together because we'll need to. People will want to. And the third one is, I think it's going to be a lot more, when people work together, people need each other. We're going to have that situation where there'll be a new perspective. Mm-hmm. We will appreciate what we have. We will recognize that, yeah, sure, we want more. But we want more for each other, not just ourselves.
Yeah, and that is such a great point to make. It was mentioned when you were sent to me that your focus is sustainability, both financially and in life, and it's so important because I think more and more we're beginning to realize just how connected we are. I hear people say, wow, look at what happened in India, or look what happened in Europe, and really it feels disconnected from where you are because you're not experiencing it, but really we're on the same globe, and what happens there is a ripple effect to the rest of the globe.
India was 156 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, I didn't even know that was possible to get that hot. Oof, a little scary. We are going, the Middle East is facing, not only are they facing a lot of political unrest, but they are facing extreme heat and severe drought, which leads to war. Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being in Miami last September with Al Gore, and he was talking about, really if we can cool the earth, we will literally cool the war too. And I thought it was a beautiful perspective. Yeah.
It is true. I mean, if we can make sure that people have enough water, have access to food, shelter, calm the storms, literally, we will see a much more peaceful, much more respectful earth again.
Yeah. And just by that shift in perspective, realizing that I don't have to take as much as I can possibly get because I need to hoard, because by a shift in perspective that there's enough for everyone if we share.
Absolutely. I don't know, I always get a kick out of the hoarders and the picker shows that, because one of the things that really hit me, I grew up in a family environment where, you had to have lots of food in the cupboard. Mm. And I was like, and then unfortunately when we had to clean out the house, some of that food had been expired for 10 years, but it was in the cupboard. Ah. And I kept thinking, we needed to, we could have given this to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And I find that there's a lot of focus, and I love the fact that the whole new design trends are even saying, minimalist. We don't need so much.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And so it's coming from all areas of society saying, we do have more than enough, and we can start giving back and sharing. And I mean, even the whole focus right now of tiny homes. Mm-hmm. Do we really need this much stuff?
Yes. Well, I get that because for years, oh gosh, since I moved out in my 20s, I've been living in studios and I've become a master at making my place. Like people come into it, it's, wow, it's so huge. It's because I've become a master at how to organize my space where I have just what I need. And if I don't use it within a couple of months, I give it away. It's not useful to me anymore. And my partner's always like, why don't you save it? You might need it some other time. I'm like, when I do, then I can either get a used one or get a new one if needed. But there's often, if I'm not using it for more than 6 months, I'm probably not going to use it in the following 6 months or going forward. So why keep it? Why not give it to someone else who can use it?
I love it. I'm trying to do that. And I'm also doing, one of my goals for this year I'm only buying at, I love to, I love if I'm entertaining, I love to have like the matchy-matchy, but I've gone away from matchy-matchy, but I do go to, like the thrift stores. And I'm finding it really interesting because, I picked up candle holders because this year I want blue for $7. And wow. I think that, I started to think, well, I know I'll get sick of them and I will give them away, but instead of giving away $70 worth of stuff, I'm now giving away $7 and they're still in perfect condition.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is we can still do the things that we want, or we can still have some of the lifestyle that we're seeing and that on, the social media and the entertainment. We just have to do it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Cara, it's interesting. There was this one gal that said to me, I bet you anything, because I grew up as well with, as you did, with the pantry full type of attitude. If we keep it full, we're always good. We'll never be starving. We'd have about 100 cans of tuna in the pantry. But one woman said to me, I bet you anything, you could probably live 6 months without buying a stitch of food by eating what's in your pantry. And, well, she was off for me because I don't quite buy as much as my family did when I was growing up. But I had a month worth of food I could eat in my pantry. I took her up on her challenge and I didn't buy any food for a month, and I was shocked how much edible food I had still left in my pantry.
I think that is something that we really need to start thinking about, because our buying, I look at how much do we throw away, like of fresh vegetables and carrot, and this is something, there's been a much more larger focus now on saying, okay, we'll make sure that the food's going to the food banks, and I know in some parts of the world it's mandatory. And I think that if you think about, if we started to eat less, and hoard less of food, then we would have less water usage, which is becoming a significant issue because we're in a drought up here right now. So I'm a little focused on water. That we would have less water usage. We would also have less transportation because we wouldn't be sending as much on the trucks and the trains to the different stores around the world. We would have we'd be able to grow some more trees because we don't need as much space to grow as much food that we're now wasting. And we'd also have less in the landfill. Like, it's just, some people say, well, that people would make less. Well, maybe if we actually paid appropriately for some of the food, everybody's quality of life could also go up. Yeah. There's ways to handle this economically, and there's going to be a lot of neat changes coming in the next few years. A lot of people are saying, well, I'm afraid because we're going to have less quality of life. I actually believe we're going to have a better quality of life.
Yes, absolutely. And even for food, I heard that France has one of the highest, as far as food, it's the highest amount to buy food for the week, but they eat better and healthier on a whole because they buy more fresh food. And I thought that was interesting.
One of the trends that businesses are looking at right now is that total cost of ownership. And it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, is it, we need to look at that in our own lives. If we're buying something cheap, if it may not be a bad thing I'm going to use the example of smoking. I've never smoked, but people say, well, it's not an expensive hobby. Well, if you add the fact that you're much higher to have different diseases, you may not want it as a hobby. And I think we need to start literally adding those dollars and cents to each choice. And some people think I'm crazy because I do look at things that way, but I do. And I think that, we need to have a better understanding of risks and potential consequences of some of our choices.
Well, I don't want folks to leave here without finding out how they can get your awesome book and find out more about you. Share that with them.
The book's available on ebook and on hard copy through Amazon.com. It's called It's Only Money, and it grows on trees. And if you have any questions or you want to contact me, you can get in touch with me through my website, caramacmillan.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Cara, for coming and sharing your great gifts and talents today on Savvy Business Radio.
Oh, Christina, thank you so much for having me on Savvy Business Radio. A wonderful chat with you. Enjoy today.
Me too. Thank you, Cara.
Thank you.
Join our mailing list today by texting Savvy Radio to find out about upcoming guests and events and receive a free gift, how podcasting can help increase sales and influence in your business.